Hey everyone, and welcome to this episode of Co-Creating with AI. I'm Martin Källström, and with me is Rasmus, as always. How are you today, Rasmus?
Good. Yeah, I just had lunch with a common friend who's always fun to meet and catch up with. Also in the AI space, who isn't
Yeah,
right now? But that was a
these
really,
days.
really good chat. How are you today?
I'm good. I had a 3-hour drive down from Stockholm, and so I have that bit of tiredness in my body, but mentally I'm loaded with thoughts from listening to podcasts and YouTube on my way down.
Cool. So today, right? Multimodal. Getting back to that topic,
Yes,
I think.
definitely.
Um,
AI with multiple modalities. And
I wonder if modalities is kind of a thing that people relate to
I
outside of
don't. I
like
mean,
health.
it's I don't relate it more than I do to the word inference. I mean, it's a learned term that is not like it's. I wouldn't even say that multimodal as a Swedish person is in my active vocabulary yet. I
Yeah.
unless it's very specifically about AI.
Yeah. Anyhow, so
Yeah.
let's explain that. I mean, for those who are not aware, right? ChatGPT just released a demo, and they have no, they're actually just rolling it out for some Plus members, but should be to all Plus members soon. Um, Basically, that you can ask it to generate images, and you can give it images, and it can analyze them and do things with them.
Mm,
So in your chat interface, you can yeah, I mean, basically ask it to, the example they take is, create a bedtime story. And then it starts generating the story, and then you ask for some pictures, it gives you some pictures. And of course, does this very, very well. It's a demo, of course. But
mm,
I think that's kind of a very like vivid example of how something like storytelling becomes a completely different thing when you go from just written text to text and images. And
yes.
of course we can, it's just like entertainment, right? It's a different thing, listening to a podcast or sorry, like reading a book or watching a movie, so to
Mm,
say, even though we're not at that modality as well yet.
mm,
But yeah, so I'm just curious to sort of explore that because it felt to me like each combination of modalities,
mm,
but let's just say text, image, sound, video, etc., will unlock new things. So
yeah.
I don't know. Do you have any thoughts around this? Did you see the demo?
I saw, yeah, and to be honest, I don't really think that the demo they published is showing the best case of multimodality in the terms of actually it's more of a they're showing an AI using tools to generate a picture, but it is in the same chat interface. So I guess the overall experience for the user is multimodal, and then there are on a deeper technical level are also multimodal AI models that natively understand several different modalities. So you can have an AI that understands both text and images, and perhaps also sound. And you can have, for example, the translation AI that Facebook or Meta built is not text. It's not based on the text modality. It's based on the audio modality, but
Mm,
it's audio to audio. So you can translate audio, but it's also text is in there because you can give text instructions applied on audio to audio generation. So you can ask it to clean the text from noise or translate the text to from English to Swedish. And so I think that like this multimodal thing can exist on so many levels, on the UI level and a deeper deep learning level, and it's exciting to see that coming up as a UI innovation as well.
yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point. Just to throw something else in the mix, and then maybe we can kind of try to generalize and frame it. But I saw this other demo, but by this influencer, I think he's called Wright McKay or something like that, and he makes these really cool demos of like using AI for coding. And the thing he demoed now was he had drawn like a system, like a very basic like app architecture on a whiteboard,
Mm-hmm.
and then he'd given it to, I mean, I guess it was ChatGPT, and then it, or I mean, I think this was actually part of the, he was probably part of this new tester group testing what I just like
Yeah.
described in the beginning, and then it understood the image,
Mm.
and it wrote the code that he then deployed, and the thing worked, and it understood quite symbolic things like an arrow
Mm.
pointing between an email and a person name, and then like what happened in little text underneath that said something what should happen, uh, and you know, I mean, I don't know, I
Yeah.
wasn't there, but if you trust him, it really worked. So that's like, I
Mm.
think that's a pretty powerful
That
example of
yeah, that's very
multimodality.
cool. Yeah, that's awesome. And it also goes to show the power of everything that our human brains are doing continuously. Just con- like bringing in the visuals and the text and the context and everything into one understanding all the time without us even having to think consciously about what we're doing. And but that giving that power to the AI is amazing that they are now maybe starting to roll out something that they announced when GPT-4 was announced initially, but never really showed off to the world, except for that very first launch video where they showed it implementing a web page from a napkin drawing.
Right, right, yeah, that's true. That was probably an experimental thing that they haven't like been able to push out before
Yes.
now. But I think it's
Mm.
interesting just on top of what you're saying, and I think that's maybe frame for me at least to really appreciate the multimodality is right, like up until, I don't know what to say, but if we just take the text-based kind of chat
Mm.
GPT, we just take
Yeah.
chat GPT, it's such a clear example for everyone, then it can understand text. That's pretty obvious when you write with it, right?
Mm. Mm.
But it couldn't understand images. And the cool thing here is now it can understand images. If you
Mm.
give it a picture of a mountain or a whiteboard drawing of a systems architecture, you know, it understands the difference. It's not only able to label them mountain, whiteboard, right?
Mm.
That was kind of pre LLM kind of thing that you did with all these image recognition kind of
Mm.
architectures. But it actually understands the picture, which is something that, of course, very natural to us as human beings. We look at something, we see the patterns, and we have some kind of frame of reference for it to interpret it and what we can do with
Mm.
it and what it's meant to, you know, convey, etc. But that it's. I mean, it's like a whole new dimension of intelligence almost
Yeah. Yeah.
to
And
these models.
I'm super curious. I want to read up on how it works on the inside, like below the hood, under the hood. I don't know even know if that information is available. There is an, an research project that came out maybe 6 months ago from Microsoft called Blip, which is like a basic image understanding model. It's available on Hugging Face. It's pretty widely known. And what Blip is doing is basically it's it's kind of cool that it in the way that it works under the hood that it it's able to label an image um, like to with a lot of labels. If you have any kind of photo or drawing, it will produce maybe 20-25 different labels on that drawing, like what are the uh, like just the objects it's seeing in the image, and then they push that through a normal text generative LLM, and through the reasoning capabilities of the text generation LLM, they are asking it to reason about if all of these labels exist in the same image, make a educated guess on what the image should contain, and then from all those labels, like because it doesn't make like sometimes like it needs to try to understand why it makes sense to have um, a, a spider and playing cards in the same game in the same image, and it makes an educated guess about the relationship about those two based on those labels and all of the others, and it turns out that it's becomes pretty accurate. so you're able to chat with it about the contents of the image, and it's almost always right, or it's at least like
Mm.
90% right. So that, but to me, that is sort of cheating. It's not the model doesn't understand images natively. They are used, like they're getting towards that understanding, giving the impression of that understanding, but not really creating a true understanding. And I'm super curious about GPT-4, if it has a true like native understanding of the image, if that's
Mm.
broken down on this like a semantic embedding level or even deeper, and how it gathers the relationship between objects in the image and so on. I'm like,
Mm.
and giving the black box nature of all of these AIs, maybe nobody knows like what
Yeah.
kind of representation that allows it to understand the arrow pointing from email to human within
Mm.
instruction on that edge about what should happen.
I mean, the probable guess would be that they've just helped ChatGPT to use Dolly, and Dolly can take text to image and image to text, probably. Like, I mean,
Yeah,
right? I mean, I don't
yeah,
sure if you can use Dolly for image to text actually, but I mean, that's the basics of these models, right? They could,
yeah.
do both.
Like it could be. Some would be somewhat disappointed. It could be that they are faking it almost the same way as Blip is doing. Microsoft is doing with Blip, but just like taking it to another magnitude, like
Mm.
maybe 100 labels instead of, and with and then with GPT-4's reasoning power, it's able to like understand what needs to be the underlying image for all those
Mm.
labels to be produced. And
But it seems like, I mean,
yeah,
given the whiteboard example, I
yeah,
mean, it would, okay, so it would label all the boxes, but it still also needs to understand where the boxes are and how they fit together. There are
yeah,
a lot of,
yeah,
like, like there's this thing, an image, this saying, an image says more than 1,000 words, right?
yeah.
But there's also like another way to say that, which is you need 1,000 words to explain an image. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
Like you
true.
need 1,000, like an
Yeah,
image
yeah,
has so much
it
information.
does.
If you're
Yes. Yeah.
actually gonna tell someone enough words so they could draw it like
Mm,
exactly the same way, that is
yeah.
an insane amount of words
Yes.
in order to describe that. So yeah, I'm really curious, like when you dive into it, and or if I do first, like let's look at it, because it really
Mm,
feels like a first or second language thing,
mm,
so yeah, I can speak English, right? I'm pretty all right. I lived in London for a few years, but I'm not a native speaker. I generally think in Swedish, even though like at times I think in English, baby. But like it's it's a different thing having a first and second language. And I wonder if that's true for these modalities like as well.
mm,
That if you have a model actually trained on a certain medium, text,
mm.
image, audio, whatever, that actually fundamentally um, creates different capabilities, because it thinks in images or it thinks in text, as if
Yes.
I think in, English or Swedish, right? Or
Mm,
Chinese, which is very different, right? That's apparently a very different way of
mm.
thinking in Chinese. I don't know. What do you think? Does that make sense?
No, yeah, that makes sense. And there is this thing about the like the native understanding, and to train you can actually train an AI in all kinds of weird modalities. Like Meta had a research project where they trained an AI to think about objects, and their spatial relationships inside a three-dimensional box, inside a cube. And they trained it on lots of data where, so that you could put 3D objects, like the vase is on the table, and they gave the coordinates of the vase, like where does it begin in the end and end in 3D space, what is the bounding box of the vase and the table and so on. And they just trained it to reason about the spatial relationships within that box. And then it became an expert on that specific thing, which is
Mm,
not super useful in the real world, maybe, or maybe it brings some kind of, together with something else or some other modalities, maybe it gives some reasoning capabilities like emergent properties, the way that GPT-4 or GPTs have had, in like intelligence or reasoning capabilities emerge just from learning to predict the next word in a text. And
mm.
So this is an ongoing exploration. What will actually happen? What emergent properties will be found by
Hmm.
creating true natively multimodal AIs?
Yeah, and it's also interesting, just like I want to go off on so many tangents right now, but I'm not going to do that. So let's save it. But if you just like, and maybe this is something I don't understand here, right? But like, let's say Dolly, right? It's a text
Yeah.
to image model.
Hmm.
And what I do then is I basically translate between two languages almost. I translate between the text language to the image language and back again.
Mm.
And that's what we've been discussing. And then text to text is kind of like you're not even translating. You're speaking the same language. I speak
Mm.
text, you give me text back, or like ChatGPT gives me text back.
Yeah.
But if you think then about like just a simple example of an image to image model, right? Like what does that actually mean in terms of, I mean, we discussed it on like an abstract level. It fundamentally understands images, but
Mm.
that needs to be combined with some kind of image to text model for it to be able to, use that in, I mean, in say these examples that we talked about with chat, like multimodal chat GPT. Like we're like, because like me communicating with images, yeah, of course I can give it an image and it gives me an image back, but how do like,
Yeah. Well,
that doesn't necessarily make sense, right? Because we're
no,
not
but
used to communicating
it
images.
comes down what the training data gives as examples. If you there are, as an example, there are models that are extremely effective at upscaling images, going from a low resolution to a high resolution image, and you have they've trained them just by giving them thousands of examples of that. And
Hmm.
that training data is so easy to synthesize by taking the high res and scaling it down to low res, and then feeding it in reverse to the AI model and say recreate the high res from this low res. Here's and then you can really
And
easily
is that
like,
fine tuning or training you're talking about there?
no, so that you can train from scratch on.
You can train from
Yeah,
scratch on that,
yeah,
like
yeah,
basically taking that flow of taking something small. You know what the input data is, you know what the output data is, and now
yeah,
you want to train the neural net so it can
yeah,
actually achieve that transformation. And that would be a foundational model for that
yes,
specific use case. Okay.
exactly, yeah, yeah. And like one software that does that really well is there's a company called Topaz that has a model called Gigapixel, which does that. And their software is quite expensive. I know you buy it for $100, but it's really, if you have any kind of photo editing workflow, it's extremely well thought out, both UX wise and technically really sound as a software.
And that is it. Okay. Mm. I mean,
Mm.
that's actually interesting also in terms of like, I don't know, intelligence and proficiency and stuff like that, what we talked about before, because it feels like what we're talking about now with the modalities, and
Mm.
that's almost a modality, what you told me now, like taking a small image and making it big. That's on the level of kind of a specific type of intelligence, um,
Mm.
almost. I don't know if
But
you could expect like a image, like a foundational image model,
mm.
to be really good at that. Or maybe you could take
Yeah,
that one and then fine tune it on that use case so it
but
becomes proficient at it.
I want to think about how the power of specifically about multimodal models, because if you have
Yeah.
that
Okay.
upscaling, that's actually just a single modality. It can only handle images, and but imagine if you also had text as a modality, so that, and it was trained on a lot of instructions. So you can say, can you upscale this from the top left corner, or make the teddy bear super sharp but not,
Mm,
but keep the background blurry, or whatever, like that. Like just the power of that speaks to the power of multimodal models,
mm.
where you can combine different ways of reasoning, or if it, maybe it even like understands audio, where it doesn't even translate to text first, it just understands your instructions when you speak to it natively.
Yeah, I
And
think that's a good point.
yeah, and
I mean,
yeah.
because it goes back to like our previous discussion around like voice as a medium as well. Like
Mm.
if it understands fundamentally, if a model fundamentally understands like text, images, and audio,
Mm.
and then you can communicate in either of those, and it can reply in either of those,
Mm.
right? I mean, I guess like we could as human people, you could technically, say something to me and I make a picture for you and give it back to you, right? I mean, I could,
Yeah.
or you
Yeah.
write something for me and then I record a voice message for you. I mean, people do
Yes.
that stuff. I have some
Yeah.
friends who always record voice messages when I text them. And so, I mean, that I think that's actually like, what does that entail then? I mean, first of all, it understands the things fundamentally such that it can uh, like interpret this whiteboard image and write code, or
Hmm.
it could then create a voice message asking me if it's understood the image like correctly before it then interprets my answer to write the code,
Yeah.
right? So I guess that's the is it just interact? It's about fundamentally understanding a medium, like we talked about last time as well, like
Mm.
understanding voice, maybe picking up other things than just the words you're saying and labeling them, but like actually like understanding voice as a spoken like as a medium, and that or audio as a medium, and then being able to express itself in it.
Yeah.
So like and that combination I guess leads to, I mean, like we've taken a few examples today, quite new things like
Mm.
multimodal, like true multimodality.
Mm.
um, I think that's all I had in me there. Do you have any last like any last reflections? But I don't know, I'm enjoying this.
Yeah.
I'm
So,
definitely.
but then the implications for like how does that, what does that do to society and future work when it comes out in at the bigger scale? When this is deployed, where is this going to bring value first? And that's I think that's always interesting to think about with new technologies. That it's not just a really well functioning demo. It's like how does it actually affect society?
Mm,
And I think that's at this point just anyone's guess, because the thing about the multimodality is that it's so just discovering what to use it for is a long term project. And how, because you can have the bedtime story is cute, but maybe it's not world changing or game changing for, and except for very lonely kids or parents with very little imagination. But it's cute to look at, and it's to translate that into um, value for anyone. I think is a would be a great exercise at some point.
no, but I'm sure let's do that in the next episode. I think that can tie into like I would want to talk about AR and stuff as well, like how AI and AR
Hmm.
VR ties together,
Sure.
which I think is
Yeah.
going to be interesting. So but let's save that for next episode, like actually looking at how these latest new capabilities around multimodality
Mm.
will like get rolled out and are being rolled out. That would be fun to take some examples and dive into.
Awesome. Let's do that. All right. Thanks to you, Rasmus, and also to our dear listener who's been with us all the way to the end of this episode. And tune in next week for another look at co-creating with AI.
Thanks, Martin.
Thanks.